Everybody. Thanks for joining us for the afternoon session. We had two great presentations this morning, and we're going to have an excellent panel discussion this afternoon. It's going to be led by Dr. Jeremy Straub. Jeremy Straub is a senior fellow at the Challey Institute for Global Innovation and Growth and an associate professor of computer science at North Dakota State University. His research focuses on the intersections between technology and policy in both artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. He is the lead inventor on 2 U.S. patents and has published over 50 journal articles and hundreds of conference papers. He's a member of multiple professional societies, including the American Society for Engineering Education and SPIE. His work has been supported by the National Science Foundation, the National Security Agency, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and other sources. He is the Associate Director of the Institute for Cybersecurity Education and Research. And again, thanks for sticking with us this afternoon. I'm excited about the panel discussion. We actually have a new member here, Taya Spelhaug, and she'll introduce herself as well. But let's all welcome Jeremy Straub and all of our panelists.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us here today. And the first thing that I want to do, as John just kind of alluded to, is give everybody on the panel an opportunity to introduce themselves. I know obviously for those that have been here the whole day, 2 of our panelists may look somewhat familiar, but just in case we have people tuning in or that have walked in since then, if you want to just kind of briefly introduce yourselves, and then we'll give Taya an opportunity to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Revana Sharfuddin. I'm a research fellow. I do labor economics and labor policy research at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. It's good to be here.
Hot mic. Here we go. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Taya Spelhaug, and I am the site director for Microsoft Fargo here in Fargo. And I've been with Microsoft for 8 years. In my previous role, I did Microsoft Philanthropies, so worked with computer science education in the state, also cybersecurity, and now in this little thing called AI. So as I've been told, or been telling a lot of people, I know a little about a lot. So if I'm not able to answer your questions, there's some other really smart people on the panel as well. But also just try to give you some general information about what we're doing at Microsoft and how this is also affecting what we're doing here in Fargo. So thanks so much for the opportunity. It's really great to be here.
Hi, I'm Will Rinehart. I'm a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. I work on tech and innovation policy with the focus on AI, but I'm kind of a generalist and I've been working in tech and innovation space for now 15 years. So happy to take any questions that anyone's going to pose our way.
All right. Well, with that, I'll come up with a. All righty. I guess I'm going to be leaning into the mic here. I said what I was going to say is with that, I'll come up with some really difficult ones now that you've committed to answering anything.
All yours.
But in all honesty, our first question here, and we're going to start off with 2 or 3 kind of quick questions, then go to a question or 2 that was sent in from people online during the previous presentations. Then we'll go to some audience questions both here and online. But our first question is, AI is already having a significant impact on society, or significant impacts on society. Are regulations keeping up with the technology? And what advice would you give to policymakers about what they should be doing in this space?
Am I take that?
Well, it's to everybody.
Okay.
Everybody, anybody.
I would say fundamentally that there is a benefit in waiting for legislators. That when you think about AI, I talked a little bit about this in my presentation, but there's a lot that's happening right now, right? We're seeing at least 50 some cases related to IP issues. There's hundreds of different regulatory actions. There's a lot that's going on. So as much as people want to try to get involved, my suggestion right now is that there is value in the wait and see approach. Economists talk about this as a real option, right? That like when you're thinking about investments, right? Investment is this really expensive thing that you can be involved in. And so therefore there's a benefit in waiting to see if the environment changes. And when you think about, I think that there's a corollary here with regulation as well, right? That when we talk about regulation, that there's a value in waiting for it, a value in waiting to see how things kind of shake out. So as much as people do want to be the first to regulate, there is a lot of benefit, I think, to you know, being basically second best, right? Or being the second to bat. I don't think that that's very attractive for a lot of people politically, right? They want to be seen as doing something. And I think the political forces, the way that they are, they really do kind of suggest that and really do make it, they do disallow that sort of the kind of wait and see approach. But I mean, my suggestion would be focus on the gaps, right? Focus on the things that you know exist, right? There are areas where we could probably extend authority, and also figure out your own enforcement actions. And if you're a legislator who's looking at this, or you're in the governor's office, right? You want to think about where you have gaps in enforcement. And I think that's actually something that most people don't do. Some states are doing this currently, but not all of them.
Yeah, I think we are just having fun up here. So I think obviously Microsoft has been very involved in policy for years. We are a 50-year-old company. AI has been around for probably longer than that. And we have been dealing with AI policy since the beginning. We have been heavily involved in looking at federal legislation, especially around what it looks like in broad swaths. So right now, there's probably 23 different states that have different AI policies. So just think about being a small business owner and what that looks like, especially if your business is cross state lines. So what does that look like if you have a policy in the state that you're in, but you're selling to another state that has a different policy? What policy do you follow? How do you even manage that? When you're looking at being a customer, what are my rights as a person who lives in North Dakota but buys something from California? You know, those are things that we're looking at. So Microsoft has been involved in looking at an overall, if there are going to be regulations, that it should be federal, that we should have something at the federal level, because it just makes things so much easier. You know, the EU has a lot of their own policies, and you know, Great Britain has their own policies. Like, there's just all these different, you know, really strong policies that we've been, and we're a global company, so we are involved in all of those different regulations and policies, and something that we've been doing, I think, a great job at looking at what is that, how do we be a trusted partner in all of these different countries, all of these different states, with the products that we're building. Because, you know, when we're building AI products, we have to look at all the regulations that are out there throughout the world, if we're going to land them in those different countries. So it's something that we're very passionate about. It's something that I think our group has done really well for many, many years.
I was wondering if my microphone would get upset again. I think all the points you both made are just excellent, but also this gives us an opportunity to look at kind of outdated regulations are having sitting in our tax codes, in our businesses, getting in the ways of our businesses to flourish. And this is something I mentioned during my presentation. And so a policy brief I recently published, it looks into the tax code and the bottlenecks we have in our tax code, the disincentive for businesses to invest in human capital. So some of the proactive things we can do is think about not only just a solution for AI revolution, for any technology. How do we think about a resilient workforce? How do we think about a workforce that is prepared for the dynamic economy, that is able to absorb skill, entrepreneurship, and risk-taking that makes American economy very unique and strong? And that would be one way to achieve that. And you talked about the small business aspect of it, and small businesses or non-employer businesses are the largest entrepreneurial sector in our economy, and that is close to, I think, over 70% of our businesses are small businesses. And technically, due to our tax code, they're not able to expense the cost they invest in their worker training. If an individual owns more than 5% of their business, they cannot expense their worker training. So if you are an owner of a mom and pop shop and you're just training your daughter for some AI tool to create some, media materials or some marketing materials, you should be able to expense that training, because technically now you're able to expense the cost of AI. So there is a mismatch. And we can think about these outdated provisions. Some of the provisions make no sense. There is a minimum education there's a cap on how much education expense you can get, and it's set in the 1970s. It's $5,000 only. And now in today's dollars, it's actually $15,000, but it didn't keep pace with with the inflation and the modern cost of education. So these are some of the things we can do, and these are pro-growth policies because they're expensing and not tax credit, so they're tax neutral. And this is government giving the power back to the businesses to make their choices. This is not government picking winners and losers. So it can adapt to local market conditions. It's not distortionary. So these are some things we can do proactively that is pro-growth, that supports free market, and that supports business. And meanwhile, we need to assess the impact. I don't think we should jump and make some really heavy policy without understanding. And in my presentation, I talk about how much we have learned about the effects in the workforce via AI. And we learned some things, and there's a lot more to learn. So I think meanwhile, when we have some information, let's think about tools. Let's go with the scissor, a smaller tool, and think about tax expensing provision before we jump with the machete. And we should learn before how it's affecting the labor market, and we can think about other tools.
Jeremy, can I jump in just a little bit more? Just kind of want to make sure that little caveat with when I said that we're in favor of federal policy, it depends on the policy too. Like, I mean, we don't want to over regulate ourselves. We are in a AI race with another country that probably won't have a lot of policies. And so we don't want to over-regulate that staples innovation. And so we're always in the frame of mind that we need to have everybody at the table. So it can't just be people in DC that are making these regulations. It has to be everybody that is working with AI, which is literally everybody these days, being part of those conversations on how is this going to really unfold, but making it in a way that is simplified, that encourages innovation and doesn't stifle it.
All right. Here we go again. Excellent. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to the next question, which is AI is having notable changes on the workforce as well. So kind of dovetailing into some of the things that we just discussed a second ago. What advice would each of you have for those currently in the workforce, and what advice would you have for students preparing to enter the workforce within the next few months or years?
This is some of the things would probably be a bit of repetition of my earlier presentation. I think when we look at headlines, it looks scarier than when we look at the aggregate economy. The headlines numbers are picked from some plants or some like Amazon workers being laid off and things of that sort. But when we just received the jobs report, that was from September, we didn't have it before because of government shutdown. Bureau of Labor Statistics released it. And people had really negative outlook on the economy, but turns out the economy added over 100,000 jobs just in September. So things are, everybody says that all the economists say that in every new advent of a new technology is that diffusion takes a lot of time. And I remember Nobel laureate Bob Solo's quote from the 80s is that computerization is everywhere except for the productivity data. So I think AI is a lot on the media, but still needs time to show up in actual labor data where there's much more to see. But it's understandable for recent graduate anxieties, and we see that part we see in employment data, not with AI, but there is issues with a recent graduate unemployment rate. So I think staying ahead of the curve and not competing with AI and making it your friend and learning as much as you can with these technologies are going to be something that's going to be helpful, but also thinking about entrepreneurial aspects of things. If white collar jobs are not future, maybe creating jobs is the future, and you have your businesses, and we know that small businesses can be really empowered with AI tools. And I don't want to go out of my expertise and give career advice because that's not my job, but just to have an outlook on the economy, what the aggregate labor data shows is that things are moving slower than we think from the headlines.
Great question, and something that we work on quite a bit within Microsoft TechSpark, and then also we have a program that just launched called Microsoft Elevate that is all around skilling. But I'm going to go back to kind of the last point on around students. I have 2 nephews and a niece who all go here, and one thing I told them right away, I said, anything that you can learn about AI, do it. Is if there's a club, join it. If there's a class, take it. If there's anything that is around AI, I want you to learn. One, she's going to social work. The other one, he's in precision ag, so he's going to get it all the time. Another one is an ag business. And so, there's going to be a lot of, there's already been in the last couple of years, disruptions in industry. There's going to be even more. And it's just going to get outpace the pace that we are currently at dramatically in the future. And so I said, those are things that you need to learn. It's not, AI is not going to take your job. It's somebody who knows AI that could take your job. I'm sure everybody has heard that. And maybe you talked about it. I want to hear I'm going to listen to your talk next time that when that gets launched. But, so I said, it's very critical that you're understanding AI. I am also part of several advisory boards in higher ed, and that is one thing that I have said, wearing my Microsoft hat, around curriculum building. I said your curriculum building should have AI embedded in throughout your curriculum. It really shouldn't just be a standalone class. It really should be asking your students to use AI in responsible ways. And I think oftentimes education gets really worried about the use of AI because people don't necessarily understand how to use it in a responsible way. So if we make this the norm, if we teach people how to use it responsibly, those can be dramatic improvements and innovations that our students can use. So just being able to have those conversations with our students, but then also our university systems on how are we preparing our students. When we're looking at innovation and how things are going to be moving in the next few years, I've also told my nieces and nephews that you're going to be a lifelong learner. Like, that used to be a buzzword. That used to be something that you would go to a professional development class on and they would say, be a lifelong learner. Well, no, that is just going to be something that you're going to need to be. And you can use Copilot on your phone to be a lifelong learner. You can use AI to learn how to do new things and transform who you want to be very, very quickly if you're able to use the systems. So if you don't understand something, you have all the tools right now in your pocket to understand that. So use it and become skilled at it. And, when we talk about AI diffusion, worldwide education and skilling come last after being able to get the technology. You have to have an area where there's electricity, and you have to have an area where there's internet, and then you have to learn how to use it in order for diffusion, AI diffusion, to really take hold, and any technology diffusion to take hold. So, we have made significant investments over the years to help worldwide learning on using AI in order to help that diffusion in those areas that are now being supported with technology and internet access.
One of the things that actually Revana mentioned in her presentation was this idea of durable skills. We call them durable skills now. And that's really, I think, where most people should be focusing their attention. This is coordination, communication, collaboration, working with other people. One of the more interesting things I've seen in the last, I've been doing this work now for 10 years, especially since COVID. I think there's a lot of hesitation for people to do cold calls and to even get cold emails. I would get cold emails all the time right before COVID, and now it seems that people just don't want to do it. I do this all the time, right? Maybe you only get like 1 out of 5 responses, but being proactive and just going out and talking with people, I think, is something that's a bit of a lost art, especially with people who are younger, unfortunately. The other thing we talked about was the canaries in the coal mine paper, which is what, Revana had talked about that in her presentation, which I think is the best out of all of the papers and really is, I think, leading the way and is hugely informative to this discussion, right? It really shows that it seems that there probably are some frictions that exist with very specific individuals, 22 to 25, and in very specific AI affected industries, primarily probably software development and then consumer outreach. I think what the interesting thing is, right, we still kind of are unsure right now what's actually going on, but my best guess is that it's a friction problem, right? That as people who work in AI are able to use AI, right? Both employers and workers are both using AI, that are normal signals that, hey, I'm dedicated to this job, that they're getting diluted. Say a couple of years ago, before ChatGPT, if you wanted to apply to a job, you'd have to tailor your resume. I had to tailor my resume, and you'd spend like an hour or 2 hours to do this. Now it can be done in, say, 10 minutes. And it's that kind of indication, right, that it's just made everything cheaper for everyone, which is again, it's made everything noisier. It's made the entire employment market much noisier. The way to solve that, right, is to then signal, right, as an economist, it's like the way to signal is that I can, that I have things that I can do that no one else can do, right? It's like hard to game features, right, or hard to game qualities. So that includes projects, right? Hey, the one thing I'm really, again, surprised with is a lot of students, I wrote a paper, I did a project, none of that's online, none of that's through Substack, none of that's accessible. And it's those sorts of things that I was doing. Again, I was doing this 15 years ago when I was trying to find my first job. I had everything online. I had everything, all of my papers that I'd ever written for all of my classes, I had those all online. And that was the reason I got my first job. They noticed it, and maybe it wasn't perfect, but it showed that I had interest in doing these things. And again, that kind of like being active, I think, is something that people really should be focusing on. That if you really do want to separate yourself out from the rest of individuals who are out there, you really just need to signal and show that, hey, I am a high quality individual. That's the kind of stuff, even as I'm looking for people, for our jobs, like that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. Are they actually interested in this? Even if you're not perfect, right? Even if maybe I disagree with you, at least you're trying. And I think that that's something that, again, I don't see a lot of people doing nowadays. I would hope it happens more consistently, but anyway.
So I guess we'll go to a question now from somebody online, which is a question about the impact of AI on the construction industry. So if there's anybody that would like to speak to that or to other related industries, I'm sure that would be of interest potentially to our person asking the question.
Sure. I've actually been looking at this and tracking where this exists. Construction industry is at a pretty low level. The best data, it's not really that great, but the best data that exists out there is it's done through the Business Trends and Outlook Survey. It's BTOS. So it does industry level, industry level and metro level data analysis on how consistently you're using LLM products. And this includes, machine learning, visual, video, chatbots, all that kind of good stuff. Construction's, it's not at the very, very lowest level, but it's towards the bottom. I think it's like right around 10% of the entire industry that's using it. Again, that's a really blunt average, but when you compare it against, say, services, right? Services is in like the 40% range. And then when you look at information services, right? So you look at technical and scientific services, that is, 40-ish% range. And then if I'm remembering this correctly, the information services is incredibly high. It's like in the 60 or 70% range. Overall, construction's doing better than than the average, but it's only slightly doing better than on average. And that's because that what you've seen also, which was kind of hinted at some of the earlier conversations, is that the industries that are using and kind of demanding AI level products and large language models, LLMs, and these other advanced tools, they're just very different than what we've traditionally seen with robotics, right? Robotics has traditionally been in food and manufacturing and construction. Those areas which are heavy in robotics tend to actually not be super heavy when it comes to LLM and AI usage. So to me, I've always separated out the two, right? That there is actually kind of an interesting bifurcation between the two, that the industries that are using robotics and that need robotics are much more, physical, whereas the things that are using these kind of AI tools that are potentially very disruptive, those are much more in scientific information, right? They're the more office clerical jobs as compared to the construction and manufacturing jobs.
Yeah, I think I definitely see similar trends with Anthropic Economic Index, or also OpenAI has published a paper where they anonymized the data of the users and matched it with ONET data and to see occupation and industry level. And you see manufacturing, construction to be on the lower end, and something people colloquially have been saying a lot, the knowledge economy, if you want to say it that way, that is the field that's being affected more. And the interesting thing about all of this is things that need dexterity, movement, just tacit knowledge of, like, if you have a bowl and you have to crack an egg, and we just do it, right? But if you have to codify it, you have to think about every little move of how you crack an egg. A human going through construction site or driving a car and so on, we just automatically do so many of these things. But when you have to automate this, it's so many layers of trial and error. And something that comes up in some types of automation that I talked about radiology before, that the benchmark AI tools do so much better, but when you bring it to the real environment, it needs a human support all the time. So you can probably see similar effects for construction and manufacturing and so on. For AI to get more involved in these fields, you need robotics to match up with AI. You need an AI embedded in a robot, and the type of dexterity, tacit knowledge that comes with a human worker, it's probably going to take a long, long time. So those industries seem like are going to be largely unaffected for short to medium term, to the very least. And it's really amazing how much if you have to automate something, you really have to change the environment for adjusting the automation. We see roads and we take it for granted, but we had to completely change our external nature, which is the earth, and make roads for us to drive a car. So for a lot of the robotics and automated equipments, you have to completely change your nature and surrounding versus humans just, for hundreds and thousands of years just went through jungles and cut things as they go. So the tacit knowledge for some of the jobs that require movement and, dexterity and so on would be protected for quite a bit of time.
I'm just going to add a brief piece to this because I think you guys nailed both of it. When you think about businesses that typically don't deal with data, and then also the question is, how is AI disrupting construction? To your point, there's a lot of pieces of AI. So is it generative AI? If that's the question that they're asking, is how is generative AI, disrupting the construction industry? That's very different than how, the automation AI piece. And so you really have to drill down to those pieces where, in construction, you're looking at analytics. I have friends that have a construction business, and they're looking at trends of where are they building, how are they building, what's a better way to build, and using AI, generative AI, to analyze data. So there are pieces that are getting used, but it depends on what the question is.
All right, well, why don't we try to go to a question here? Is there anybody in the room that has a question they'd like to ask?
Just to start, I have a question that two of us actually had, so I'm thinking a few people may have it in the room, and then we can ask another question. But Am I on the microphone? Okay. Anyway, so Will had mentioned previously, I think something that makes a lot of sense, and that's the idea that we shouldn't regulate the technology, but regulate the use of the technology. But if you think about it, most of the things that we're worried about, AI doing, there are laws. If a person did those things, there would be laws against those things like discrimination. And so I just have a question for everybody, and this is a question that two of us at least shared, and that's, so do we need any regulation of AI at all, or can we just say that any regulation that applies to a human also applies to AI?
So in part, I don't think that as a first hash of the problem, I don't think that's wrong. Which to say very, very clearly that the question is how do we apply old principles to new problems? That is something that at least I try to suggest in my presentation, that effectively, right, that we have these old ideas of, say, property rights, of consumer protection, of civil rights law, that the interesting thing will be as how do those apply in the new circumstances when it interacts with AI systems. And a lot of that has been effectively dealt with, I would say. The areas where we could see or potentially would want to understand better what's actually going on would potentially be transparency, right? These large systems exist, and we kind of have a good sense of what's going on, but perhaps something that's mandated that everyone has to tell us what's going on in the back end. Broadly speaking, sometimes, for example, I mean, Grok, it's interesting, but they don't do what are called they don't do what are called system cards, or they're inconsistent with what they're telling people. So I think that there could be some very narrow ways in which we would actually want legislation. But broadly speaking, I think you're exactly right. In the sense that a lot of the current laws that we have are going to solve a lot of the problems in the near term that people think that exists with these systems. There's also this really interesting thing that's happening, which we kind of didn't mention too much about it, but child safety, broadly speaking, is this very interesting sort of tension that's going on right now, which is that we have character AI, which is a chat bot, right? It was bot. And what's going to be interesting to see is how all of these, there's a question about kids' mental health and how that integrates with chatbot systems. That could be another area where you do see work in legislative action. I think what's an interesting part, again, of that is that character AI has basically anyone that's under 18, they've kicked off their platform. And it seems also that there was a recent Wired report that all of the major chatbot companies got together in Stanford, and they've been talking with Stanford, so they may release something proactively. That I think is a very interesting. We just haven't seen that proactive sense, and this has also been interesting with with Microsoft and your guys' relationship with OpenAI and with Anthropic. A whole bunch of these companies are being very proactive because they do see the fact that they don't want to be in the same place as social media and privacy law, and they do want to be able to have a clear pathway. They don't want to be in the same realm as we were in 2018 or 2016, right, when we started proposing privacy laws, and then you had to change your entire flow and patterns. So I think that what we're seeing is this proactive sense of being, we want to be good players. Not to say that also the social media platforms weren't good players, but I think it's just a different context and a different situation. And I think it's also much easier considering the product itself. But there are these little things that, well, not little things by any means, but I think that the major areas we'll probably see some action would be in transparency and then child safety, broadly speaking.
Anybody else? So I'll throw out just a quick framework as a way to maybe think about this, and maybe this will also trigger other people to jump in. You have kind of three different areas, right? You have the stuff that is AI specific, like some of the stuff you mentioned with like child protection, where we don't really have that issue. I mean, some people would argue that we have the issue, but you're not going to stop one 10-year-old talking to another 10-year-old about anything. They're in an equal place. But when you have a 10-year-old talking to an AI, the AI has got more world experience, quote unquote, than it is. So you have that kind of framework. You have a lot of areas that are covered by existing laws, but there are some of those existing laws that may be very specific to a human. So if there's a law that says a human shall not kill another human, and we don't want AIs murdering people, that may be a law that we need to change to make it more general. And then the third thing is the areas where we have something that's kind of falling in the cracks where it just doesn't fit nicely into those categories. So I don't know if that triggers anybody else, or if we've got any other thoughts.
No, I think that's exactly correct. And I think the last two categories you mentioned are actually pretty close to each other, right? That the question of the stuff in the gaps, right? There is this other question about radiologists, right? Revana was talking about radiologists. The interesting thing is that when you actually ask a lot of doctors about this question, one of the reasons why you don't have radiologists, right, there's two, I'm actually working on a paper on this to try to pull together as much as possible. But understanding where the current regulatory system basically creates these fractures, right? Radiologists are interesting and doctors are interesting for two separate related problems. One of them is that oftentimes CMS, right, that CMS won't pay for the pricing of the high quality AI system. So even if you do have a better system, that it's an AI system, the government's not going to pay for it. Insurance is not going to accept it. So cool. It's just never going to get deployed in the market, right? So even if something is legal, whether or not it actually fits within the pricing structure of basically the medicine system, I think is one really, really interesting and important caveat. Another kind of related problem is kind of related also to radiologists, which is, if you've got an AI system and your AI system conflicts with your standard of care, which if you ever get sued, right, like a doctor, I believe it's a technical term, is standard of care or duty of, it is a duty of care, but it's basically like, if you ever get sued, you have to basically suggest, well, what I was doing was something that everyone else is doing. And so it creates this interesting sort of liability problem when you're talking about AI systems, because if your AI system provides you with information that's better, but it's in conflict with what everyone is typically doing in that system, that it is easier for you to just say, well, I'm going to follow what everyone else is doing, because therefore I'm always going to be basically covered through my liability, as compared to using an AI system which may conflict with the standard of care, even though it's better than what everyone else is agreeing to. And in fact, this has created a very interesting sort of liability problem. It's very, 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 very wonky, but when you talk to doctors, you should actually ask them this question about liability, how they understand liability within AI systems, because that conflict oftentimes comes about. My cousin is a pediatrician, and I was actually asking her this exact problem, and she's like, oh yeah, that's something that a lot of people think about, and because of it, we just don't really use a lot of those systems, or if we do, we just kind of don't really listen to them. And when you look at surveys, that's actually what you find.
So I want to go back to another. Did anybody else have anything else? All right. And if not, then I want to go back to another online question here. So we had a question from somebody online. What is the most effective way to address the AI challenge, AI generally, in the education system? They mentioned both K-12 and higher ed, with a focus on allowing learners to be productive in this new AI world. And I think, Taya, you kind of spoke to that a little bit with what you were telling your nieces and your nephews, but maybe are there any specific recommendations, specific thoughts that any of our panelists might have specifically related to the educational systems?
Yes. Microsoft has done quite a bit of work in a few different areas. We launched some AI skilling in Washington State a few years ago. And it was quite interesting because it was using different regional teaching groups to kind of do train the trainer. So there's 9 different organizations, regional organizations within the Washington State system. They were doing train the trainer for each of those 9 systems, and then that train the trainer would then go back to that school or school district within their region to do more train the training and so forth. And it was all about AI. It was about helping teachers to utilize AI in order to do, curriculum advancement and planning, helping to teach teachers how to use AI, but then also help teach teachers to teach AI to their students and how to use it. And one thing that came out of that, and that was, like I said, a couple years ago, so it was still kind of early when generative AI started popping on the system, and you had people who weren't used to using it, especially school board members, that were quite fearful of it. And so there were some school boards that shut down the program because they just didn't want AI in the education system, period. They didn't really want to learn about it. They didn't really want to understand, they just were like, it's big, bad, scary, so no. So we kind of did a little bit of, reevaluation on what going to schools looks like and how do we approach that. And the fear of the unknown is very, very powerful. And so being able to have those conversations about why AI is good and why, and embedding that into the training. So when the trainer goes to the school board or goes to the superintendent, they're able to start with the why, start with this is why we would like to support students in AI and teachers in AI, and give some just general education to the overall public in order to help that to land within the educational systems. So we've had a lot of learnings throughout the years when we have been doing trainings and when we've been working with different groups on training. And so, that's just, I'll let the other two talk about it, but that's just a piece of what we've learned throughout the years on just how to combat that fear of the unknown.
I don't think I have a lot more to add to this, except for perhaps the technology needs to get to the direction of not using just ChatGPT or Claude the way it's available, but more customized to a specific school and district, and public-private partnership is exactly what we need. And obviously with ChatGPT, you now are able to build your own AI in your own personal computer that they made it publicly available. So I think the first part would be to public education and inform teachers and collaborate to create specific tools for specific school, for specific disciplines. So you're not going out in the wild of ChatGPT. And maybe those are some ways to navigate the fear. But I think what you guys did are exactly the right way to go.
Thank you. And the president of Microsoft, his name is Brad Smith. He wrote a book several years ago called Tools and Weapons. And ultimately, this is before ChatGPT and generative AI hit the scene in November of 2022. But this was a book that strictly talked about how technology can be used as a tool and also as a weapon, and how to view that and how to become a good consumer of AI in order to make sure that the AI that you're using or the technology that you're using is used as a tool and not a weapon. We have a group called Responsible AI in Microsoft. It has been an organization within Microsoft for probably 20, 25 years, looking at how Microsoft tools are just that, a tool, and not used as a weapon. And it has become even more critical with generative AI and all the different fakes that can get produced to make sure that and biases that can be produced within AI that we're working on that. And so, we talk a lot about that piece of tools and weapons when we're talking about education and helping the educational system to say, yes, we are fully aware that this could cause problems. We are fully aware that you could have a student write their whole entire paper using AI. But you know what? There's also an AI that could review that paper that shows you that they wrote the whole entire thing in AI. So there's just ways of being able to have those conversations and say, okay, being very frank and having that, building that rapport to say, yes, we are Microsoft. We have put a lot of energy into AI. However, a lot of that energy has also been in using it responsibly. And so we're going to help you do that. And these are the ways that we're going to help you do that. And that's with everybody. I mean, I think that's anybody who's creating products around AI. We've been collaborating with a lot of other groups too, to make sure that that is just the general feeling that this is we understand that this could be a weapon, but we're also really invested in making it a tool.
Real quick, just a couple additions here. One thing I would say, I think the mileage depends on your industry, right, and your educational opportunities. Engineers, especially, I've been seeing them go much, more towards like the blue book thing, right, where you have in-class tests, you have a lot more numbers. Whereas some of the people that I know that work in, in rhetoric and in political science, they are just much more explicit about their use, and they are bringing it within the classroom, understanding it, but then also critiquing themselves and understanding the outputs. So I think that we're seeing both ways, right? One way, which is just going kind of old school and just doing things through, root memorization and through the kind of like the ways that a lot of people had learned, and then through very, very explicit means on the other end, right, through saying, hey, this is what the output was, here's where I think it was wrong. And I think that it really just depends on the industry and the kind of educational space that you're in. The other part of it is I'll be very honest that basically, we're only now just getting understandings about labor market and how these things are affecting productivity. We really have almost no understanding of how ChatGPT affects or LLMs affect educational outcomes. It's just like it's a black box right now. I think there's only one or two really good papers, and I saw one of them literally come through yesterday, and I haven't really read through it, but I know that was literally November. So experiments, pure experiments. I think this is actually a huge space, especially if you're a graduate student or you're a researcher. Having something that is actually clearly defined as an experiment within a study, right? You should definitely do it, because now is the time to do it, because there just is, we have very little knowledge about what's going on within the educational space.
I love that you brought up blue books. You gave me a little stress
Yeah.
after thinking about all the blue books that I had to go through in college. You guys know what blue books are? Maybe? No? Yeah, it's like, ooh, boy, you brought me back. So.
Well, not to worry, we're going to do the quiz right now. So everybody get your blue book out. I want to go to another question from the audience here, but before we completely leave education, I did want to give you each an opportunity to say whether you kind of feel like what we're doing in formal education and informal education is meeting the mark, or are we a ways off from the mark? What do we need to do to hit the mark if you don't think we're meeting it? But we'll try to go quickly so we can jump to the audience and try to get at least another question or two before we wrap up.
No. More than that?
That was quick.
Yes and no, I should say. There's a lot of steps that are being taken. And as I said before, I think there could be a lot more embedding AI and technology principles within curriculum. I know it's hard. I know it probably doesn't always marry well with other pieces, but I think also training educators to understand how to do that is going to be critical. There's just more room there.
I think the impacts are probably very heterogeneous across the country and different countries. So as I previously, during my presentation, I was sharing that my grad school was in Europe and my undergrad, my work is here in East Coast. And in certain universities in Europe, there is a lot of pushback. We don't want to use it altogether. This is going to take away your methods of learning. Even in economics, even at advanced learning stage, some professors strictly said you are not allowed to use it altogether. And then I come to my current employer at Mercatus Center, and obviously one of our prominent figures, Tyler Cowan, is very pro-technology. And we were told to just use as much as you can to be the most productive version of yourself. So I think this will depend on the culture of that region, of how people are, how they feel about technology. And this is not K-12, and this is more with university, and we're all aware of this misalignment of incentives. Is that the way our professorship and tenure track works, that more is related to research, and so much. I have had so many amazing professors, but I think they were really great professors because they were really passionate about teaching. But we also have professors who were like, I'm just teaching because I have to, I would rather do research. And so at that level, there is mismatch of what we are learning in universities and what the labor market is demanding as soon as you get out. And you hear from so many students over and over again that, oh, the things I learned in college, my core modules, this module, and spend all this money is not matching with what I am studying, what I need to do for my job. This is a long point I'm trying to make, but I think there is an incentive misalignment in our higher education of how people are trained and their trainers' incentive. And I I'm very nervous as I'm making this point at a university, but that's my thoughts are.
And real quick, I think the problem's more endemic and they stretch further back than just what's happening with ChatGPT. I mean, you know, when I was in grad school, I think I was in the very, very tail end of an older generation of grad school. And one of the things that was really surprising now is just the fact that, you know, having taught at two different experiences in two different places, students no longer, I mean, last time I was teaching for as a research assistants, they basically were no longer doing the reading in a way that 10 years beforehand. It was just like that just was not the case. That's the thing I really worry about right now. I think it's not enough people do the reading and not enough people are doing the work. I think that's just a more endemic problem. There's a huge issue with grade inflation, with being able to do the math, but I think that's just much, much more endemic than just what's going on with AI.
All right, if the microphone decides to let us, let's go to the question from the audience.
Right, Will. I'm going to go back to the regulation. The CEO of Anthropic came out on 60 Minutes last week and said he is very, very uncomfortable with no regulation, and that who the heck who voted for them, him and Sam Altman, to create all these models. And he says because these models are going to be destructive in the end. And this is a guy who is creating these models. And that leads me to my second question. This morning, my son and my family were watching news while they're eating breakfast, and I'm watching the news, and Elon Musk says 20 years from now, we're not going to have any jobs. And these are the guys with big egos. This is what they want. I mean, when he's telling me that, I'm saying he wants to be the king of the world. He's seeing himself as, I'm going to create this technology, I'm going to control it. And this is what I'm telling you right now. My son, class of 2036, 7 years old, says, why are we going to school? We're not going to have any jobs, right? So what do I tell him? You know, because if these guys, this is their goal, right? He is telling me that my goal, he's saying it's going to happen, but he's telling me that my goal of developing this technology, this is the reason why I'm fighting with OpenAI, because I want to have that technology to get to my own goal. I don't want some Altman to get there. I mean, that's what I hear when he says stuff like that. What do you guys say to that? And I know we've said, well, it's not going to take our jobs, but my son he's saying 10 to 20 years from now, my son is saying 10 years from now, I don't need to why am I studying this when I'm not going to have a job? They're just going to give me free money, and it was well, that's what he's.
I mean, I want free money too. That'd be great.
I don't have
Son, 7-year-old,
Yeah.
greatest mind ever.
Well, I mean, but that's what he was told by
by
the
Elon.
richest man in the world.
So-
So with the regulation, my car just started driving crazy. It has a Mad Max mode, and it's going 20 miles per hour. And I'm saying this is illegal. The car should not be driving itself and doing this, going in and out of traffic.
Yeah, what's funny about all this is Elon in 2015 said that we were going to have fully autonomous taxis by 2020, and his system has yet to create it. And he thought that he would completely change things fundamentally by 2020, 2021. He made this prediction. You can actually look online. I'd highly suggest it with Wikipedia. I think that a lot of people who work in this space make very, very, very bold predictions. And I do know that people are working on these systems. There's a lot of other people on very, very opposite sides who think, Omodi over at Anthropic literally said in 5-10 years, we're going to have complete displacement of 50% of all jobs. Now, the interesting thing is that this prediction was made quite literally in 2013, in 2014, and 2015. This is actually how I kind of mentioned it, but this is originally how I got involved in this in the space of AI, which is understanding the nature of the predictions. The longer term trend is very, very clear, right? As long as people are getting richer, fundamentally, then you're going to have a continual growth of jobs. And that's the real thing that I think we need to focus on. This is Autor was mentioned in Revana's work. He's done a lot of really, really interesting work on this. You look at long-term trends. And there is the other thing very much to check out is what's called the Baumol effect, which is that as things get easier and more productive in one side of the economy, basically the things that are harder to produce, particularly service jobs, you have more demand for that. And so one of the unfortunate side effects is that sometimes you actually get inflation in that, or you get increases in prices in those areas. But we've seen this trend change over time. Broadly, what I would say to your son is, one, to focus on core skills, right? Coordination, understanding, being, looking at the world and trying to be curious about the world. Knowing that jobs will still exist. I think that to think that jobs are going to be fundamentally gone. I mean, we've made this prediction. We made this prediction for generations and generations. Keynes actually, John Keynes, the great economist, suggested that once people, that effectively right now people should only work something like 15 hours a week, and yet people aren't, right? They're working 35 hours a week. But again, when you look at the long sweep of history, the number of hours have gone down. People are enjoying, they have typically, in spite of some of the issues here in the United States, they typically do have longer vacations. There's a whole bunch of really positive benefits to the economy, and we've seen a lot of really good trends over the long term. What I would say is, you do need to focus on these things. You need to focus on being able to learn. That's actually one of the more important things we see with education, is that the ability to learn is in fact one of the big values of going to college, right? That you can show people that you're willing to be dedicated to long-term tasks, like that your pure knowledge that comes from education and from graduate school or undergraduate is basically completely swamped in a lot of industries by your ability to signal that you can learn, that you can do a long-term project, that you can be dedicated to something. So I think those are the things that you should be focused on. Happy to talk about it more. I'll just be honest. I mean, when you hear Altman and you hear Elon Musk talking about this and Modi talking about this, that we're going to have no jobs in 5 or 10 years, I'm just skeptical, because we heard this before and all the signs don't really suggest it yet. You would look for a whole bunch of things in the economy that are happening, and yet they're not happening right now. Not to say that they couldn't potentially happen, but the long-term structural kind of forces that exist in our economy, they're constantly searching for that. And as long as we maintain a dynamic economy, there will be more jobs that exist in the future. And jobs that didn't exist, right? Like, people are talking about getting rid of marketing jobs and like SEO jobs, search engine optimization jobs, right? Some of those are going away. That probably is going away. That stuff didn't exist in 2006, right? I remember quite literally when I was an undergraduate, some guy came in and told me about this new job, which was social media marketing. And that was just unheard of at that time. These things are continually dynamic, and as long as we allow for the dynamism to exist in the economy, which we do have to be attendant to, as long as we allow for that dynamism, I don't think there's a long-term problem.
With some of the founders, and there is the little bit of mismatch you see between the technologists and the economists when they're looking at how this technology is being deployed and how it's affecting everyone's job. And obviously, some folks genuinely are worried. I don't want to say everybody's, but you have to wonder a little bit of the motivational reasoning of that, and then fundraising aspect of how these technology companies gain funds and deploy new technologies. It's actually in their interest to really make these big claims. But I'm not trying to say everybody's doing that. Some people are genuinely worried. So you have to think about the motivational reasoning aspect of that a little bit. I mean, I think in the 60s and 70s, we already had those movies of flying cars, right? I don't see the flying cars here yet. But so some of the breakthroughs happen and some others didn't. And I'm just imagining a 7, 8-year-old, like, what do you tell them? You tell them, you create new jobs, you create a new type of world. You imagine. I think they're really good at imagining at that age.
So unfortunately, we're almost out of time, but I want to give each member of the panel a minute. Maybe we could try to keep this quick again. What are kind of the key takeaways, final thoughts? What would you like people to take away from this panel, from what, for our folks that spoke earlier in the day, from your presentations, from this panel, et cetera? And maybe we'll just, whoever wants to go first.
I would say just be curious. Teach others to be curious, ask good questions. When it comes to AI, I mean, you can ask Copilot good questions if you want. But yeah, I think when it comes to AI, be curious, ask questions, and don't let the fear of the unknown, take a hold of you or be too powerful in your life.
Do the readings. That's all you have to do. There's so much alpha in actually reading the prime material, whether it's a law, whether it's a model, whether it's a paper, just do the readings.
I think you can pick and choose. Like previously, we had to, every jobs, even if it's our job that we're passionate about, I mentioned this earlier, from theoretical economic point of view, jobs are bundles of tasks. And we know in all of our jobs, certain tasks we hate, certain tasks we really like, we're passionate about, and our identity and self-worth and value in community are tied to those little tasks. So maybe the task you hate, try to be as lazy as you can with those tasks and automate it. And the things that you're really passionate about, just protect those and really, pour all your heart and soul on those. I think then it's a win-win.
All right, well, let's give a quick round of applause and thank our panelists. So before we wrap up, I want to thank everybody for attending this event. We were just talking out during the lunch break about how long we've been doing this for, and we think this may be the 5th one, I think was where we ended up. Is that right, John? 5th, okay. So, again, I mean, AI has changed so dramatically in that time. We had a really great audience this morning of, we think about 80 or 90 people in here, at least 35 on Zoom, because I know there were 35 on Zoom at one time, probably a few more that came and left. So a lot of interest in this, a lot of change, but again, also a lot of kind of similar themes about perhaps not needing to regulate just for the purpose of regulating, about how AI can actually tie in to making humanity a better world for humanity, making it so humanity can actually flourish, which are really some of the Challey Institute's key themes and goals and areas to explore. So again, thanks everybody for coming today, and I'll turn it back over to John for some last words.
So I'm not going to be able to offer a lot of wisdom after that. Jeremy did a nice job of wrapping it up. But again, I think we had I know we had 2 great presentations this morning. So, Revana, thank you for presenting and helping us to understand the labor implications better. And Will, thank you for helping us understand the regulatory aspects of AI as well. And then Taya, this is a great panel too. I love your message about just don't be afraid of AI and let's figure out how to use it, especially you think about it at a university. And I think a lot of professors are kind of afraid of AI. They're like, we're just going to not let anybody use AI. Well, you can't do that. I mean, because we know that eventually that our students are going to be out there in the workplace are going to be at a big disadvantage if we say, well, you just can't be exposed to any AI, and then you'll just be exposed when you get out in the workplace and you'll be at a big disadvantage against everyone else. And so I love the idea of let's figure out how we can use it. And I'm really excited about the prospects for the future. I think that the overall tone, I mean, hopefully everyone else feels this way. I always feel optimistic, but I'm super optimistic about our future, and especially with AI and the great people who are leading us in this, understanding this. So thanks everyone for being here, and hope to see you at our next event. So thanks a lot.